Still the source effort. We're not allowed to bring it up at Christmas.
I'm fucking real, bro. You ain't shit.
I mean, if I can't say something that just cut cold or make someone laugh, I don't even type it.
You a fucking punk-ass bitch!
Jesus Christ, that hurt. I'm still got a headache over that.
I'm the greatest man talking on the fucking face of the earth right now.
You should be thanking me that I'm talking about Tennessee.
You just can't coach, to be honest with you. It's a high school coach.
Fuck me.
What is it all with again? It's over again.
Quit the pie. Not feeling good.
Yeah, go ahead, Unabomber. What the fuck are you saying about the SEC, bro?
Don't be ridiculous right now, okay?
No, USC is far better than Oklahoma historically.
Can we get a timeout just for half a second?
Because I want brothers nothing like you every goddamn day!
I just can't believe y'all put a statue of this guy already at your campus.
Dude, whatever you're smoking, buy a ton of it.
You a fucking punk-ass bitch!
Then it makes me look like I got owned or something.
Smacking off.
And welcome to Smacking Off the Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Madden. I'm joined with my co-host and producer, Mr. Doug Phillips. Doug, how are you this evening?
It's a great night.
Oh, it is really a great night. Full moon out tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very nice.
Yeah, so if you listen real hard, you'll hear ambulances everywhere.
Yes, ambulances and the guttural cries of crazy people.
That's a weird thing, but it's a true thing.
It has something to do with the girls' menses, too, from what I understand.
In the vet field, around the full moon, for some reason, more people come in with their animals.
Yeah.
Emergency room, same thing.
Do they come in with, like, condoms hanging out of their ass or something like that? Has that ever happened?
I actually heard a story about something like that one time, but I don't really want to go into it on the podcast.
Okay, and now we're going to go to Doug on his story that he doesn't want to tell on the podcast.
Yeah. There was an old man that used to live beside one of my friends in Florida, and they always heard the dog over there screaming.
You know, I think you told me this story like years ago.
Yeah, and it got out of the yard one time and it had a condom hanging out of his ass.
Yeah. Well, at least he was using a condom.
Right. They called the police. The police didn't come. The police hung up on them.
Because they were probably used to coming over there for that sort of thing.
That or they just figured it was a prank.
Anyways.
That was in the 80s, so.
I don't know, but I mean, you know, you look at, without trying to get too political, you know, the school shooters, you know, and all these people that are showing up in public places, shooting up places.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those have been interacted with by police and FBI, and most of them, I mean, you know, nothing ever comes of it until they, you know, blow the school up.
Right. And then
and all this guy was really doing was porking his dog, so, you know.
And dogs are not citizens, they're property. Everybody knows that.
In the state of Alabama in particular, where we're broadcasting the show from, animals are property.
You know, it sounds terrible, but if you make a dog where they're not property, or an animal where they're not property, it's a whole nother set of side effects that nobody ever thinks about.
For example?
Litigation. All the time, people suing on behalf of animals.
Yeah.
I mean, that's happening now, but it
happens a lot out in, like, California and places like that.
Yeah. An animal can't have a right if it can't communicate. Kids don't really have rights. They do, but they don't. Their rights have to be brought forth by somebody that can present the.
Yeah, well, I mean, true, but I mean that's just from a legal standpoint. From a moral standpoint,
no,
of course, animals have rights. You know, I don't want to get in any trouble with the
right
pedo people. I don't want pedo people outside the house. Protesting and
we're doing this at your house. Fuck PETA.
Yeah, but you live across the street, so you're going to have to deal with it, too.
Yeah, and
you're at least going to have to hear it.
And they do bombs, don't they? I mean, we live pretty close.
Do the PETA people, do they know about bombs?
Yeah.
Who did they ever bomb?
Wouldn't, PETA has, they've bombed before.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Shut up.
No, seriously. They're one of the most deadly terror organizations in North America.
I thought they were like PETA. Shut the fuck up. You're making this shit up as you go along.
PETA used to have a sign down in downtown Birmingham. You could see it from the interstate.
I remember the little naked girl in the cage down there by the fountain every once in a while.
The only one I remember is, you remember the McFish billboard that used to be on 280? On the other side, it had PETA had a sign that said fishing is one of the biggest forms of animal cruelty known to man.
I never looked at that side because it didn't have a delicious filet-o-fish sandwich. Yeah.
That's shark or something. Is it? No, shark's expensive.
Is it called McFish? It should be.
Should be, yeah.
It should be. Well, we have a wonderful show this week. Of course, our I think our draft predictions last week kind of a bust. Timothy, I guess he gets an attaboy because didn't he call Baker for number 1?
No. He said he thought he was the best quarterback in the.
Obviously he was because the Browns snatched his ass up.
He didn't call it. I don't think he called it in the podcast. Now, he did hit me up the next morning on Messenger and tell me the word is out. This is guaranteed. Baker's going first. And I didn't really believe him. But then I turned the draft on and I was like, holy shit.
Do you think Baker's really excited to be going to Cleveland, of all places? I mean, I guess for bragging rights, he's the number 1 pick. But
I don't think there's a place. Cleveland's got a bad image right now or whatever because they've gone through some great quarterbacks and nothing's happened. But I think any organization, if they want to put forth the money and get the right players in there, they can win. So.
Well, there are automatically were cries of, okay, well, yeah, Cleveland is screwed up again, Manziel 2.0 and this, that, and the other.
I mean, Cleveland's not really Cleveland. Cleveland is really Baltimore.
Yeah.
Remember the Ravens?
Yeah.
Cleveland moved to Baltimore, won a Super Bowl within the first few years of moving there. Had never won a Super Bowl at Cleveland. So, and then Cleveland gets another franchise, and they still suck. They get close every now and then, but
well, Cleveland is.
There's a reason that people believe that Cleveland's cursed.
Well, in that regard, I guess Cleveland is still Cleveland.
Yeah.
Even though they've changed hands and ownership and so on and so forth. I don't know. I mean, they've had. I think it was Bob had pointed out the fact that they've had some great draft picks. They should be just about stacked as you could possibly imagine for an NFL franchise. And of course, I believe later on in the draft, I don't have the who picked who in front of him. I think later on in the draft, they kind of filled some holes on defense that they needed to fill.
Being a few years older than you, being an old man, I actually remember the days in the 80s when Cleveland was. They just could not quite get to the Super Bowl. Bernie Kosar at quarterback, Ozzie Newsome, which was a Bama receiver.
Yeah.
They had some hellacious running backs too. They got to the AFC Championship game 2 or 3 years in a row, and just talking about come down to the last play.
Sure, kind of like the Denver Broncos -1, I guess you could say. Yeah.
And the Denver Broncos 2 years in a row was the team that beat them in the AFC Championship game. Usually Elway with a long pass at the end of the game one time.
And went on to promptly lose the Super Bowls. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out.
But in their defense, in the Broncos' defense, they end up coming back pretty strong right at the end of Elway's career and won 2 in a row.
What do we got tonight? What are we doing tonight? Let's talk about it.
We're bringing on a committee, a blue blood committee, and we're going to reset the blue blood list.
This is going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm looking very forward to this because, the list definitely has changed over the years. What one just right off the top of my head that was always considered a blue blood, Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan's got no place on this list.
Yeah, Michigan has no place in this list.
And Nebraska is getting really shaky. I think we just need to talk it out. Let's see what everybody thinks. The blue blood list originally is 8. It's Alabama, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, USC, Michigan, Texas, Nebraska. Is that right?
Yeah, I think those first 4 probably could remain intact. Notre Dame still. I mean, I don't know where they stand. The fact that, they are an independent team. They're not aligned with a conference. The fact that they play a brutal schedule year in and year out because of that.
And just the amount. I know a lot of them are a long time ago. They've just got it's too many championships that are really considered legit to throw them out. And you're going to hear people say, well, Alabama made up a whole bunch of national championships.
Now, they didn't make up the last 4. That's for goddamn sure.
Well, I mean, they got 11 AP titles. That's in the modern era. And Notre Dame's got 8 in the modern era. So that'll put it in perspective. I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. Nebraska. Could not find a Nebraska fan to come on. Actually, that shouldn't really come.
Yeah, Frost gets 10 wins this year. Trust me, you'll see Nebraska fans coming out of the woodworks.
But
kind of like we did with Georgia.
But I'm trying to figure out the blue blood. I mean, truthfully, without getting into this segment as deep as it's going to get, there's a few teams that need to be on this list that probably aren't. And like you said, Michigan's got no place. Nebraska probably. Nebraska has 5 national championships. Yeah. All of them since 1970. Not really sure how they ended up on that list. Anyway.
Well, and again, do we have to just come up with 8 teams for the Blue Bloods?
No, it could be 10.
Yeah.
Texas, I don't know.
Texas hasn't been relevant since they played Alabama in the national championship. If you want to get down to it,
but that's not a big. Alabama went from 1992 to 2009 with nothing. So
nothing.
So it happens, and Notre Dame has been since 1988 to now.
Yeah.
They do have the BCS appearance that it was kind of an appearance. They ran out on the field, and then Alabama took over.
Yeah,
but
Alabama ran out on the field too.
Yeah, that was the problem.
Yeah, but, I don't know. We could sit and pontificate about that game all day long. The outcome was just. We'll put it that way, without rubbing the salt in the wounds of the poor Notre Dame fans that are waiting for their waiting to reclaim that spot at prominence. I don't know. They came a little close last year. It seemed like for half a minute as far as the discussion went. And
it don't take Notre Dame much to get into the discussion
because
their schedule is so tough.
Mm-hmm.
I expect them to kind of creep back into the conversation this year for a minute.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Now, of course, the reputation and talk are one thing, and what actually happens on the field is quite another. We know that quite a bit, particularly with last year, both of us being Alabama fans. Well, at least me. I know you got the call on that one, but wondering if we were actually going to get a call to the big dance at all.
Yeah.
That was a little bit harrowing for a minute, but seemed to work out pretty good for us because, again, we handled it on the field.
The truth is, a lot of the people who are saying that Alabama didn't earn their way into they're right. But the problem is nobody else did either, and you got to have 4 teams, and you got a situation where Bama was like the only viable team for number 4.
And again, it wasn't the fact that people are going to tune in across the country to see Alabama win.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody across the country, unless you live in the state of Alabama
or have lose.
They wanted to see Alabama lose, and they were disappointed this year. They might get their chance next year. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. So, did you get any feedback this week on the Smack Jesus appearance?
Yes, I did. By a couple people that he actually named, and there's actually people that have hit me up that I've never had any interaction with before. Basically hit me up and said that we've aligned ourselves with Russ and so on and so forth.
With
so
evil.
There has there's been some strong feels over that one. So that definitely spells out another appearance for Russ very soon.
Mm-hmm.
No two ways around it. And to anybody who's listening to the sound of my voice, if Russ rubs you the wrong way, we've provided a forum where you can actually talk to Russ and tell him exactly how you feel here on Smacking Off the Podcast.
Go find us on Smacking Off the Podcast.
We're easy to find. We're so easy to find, it's not even funny. We're everywhere.
Yeah. And if you can't find us there, look for us at hashtag Family Smack.
That's a brand new page that we've started this week, for better or worse. I think I've pegged it right because we really aim to be the worst smack group on the internet, particularly when fields are involved.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lawless wasteland. Come and hang out and party with us and bring your dankest.
Here's great news about
Please
2 wonderful Baraxo hand cleaning products. First, Baraxo powdered hand soap in a new plastic decorator container. Looks like this on the grocer's shelf, and like this on your bathroom or kitchen sink. Perfect for everyday hand washing. Baraxo washes hands cleaner and faster than bar soaps can. And here's exciting new Baraxo waterless hand cleaner. Watch. Just a little dab. Removes paint, soil stains, grease, shoe polish, or wax. In fact, new Baraxo waterless hand cleaner removes the toughest dirt or stains. Gets hands clean and smooth fast, anytime. In the workshop, camping, on the road, anywhere. Without water. What a convenience. That's new Baraxo waterless hand cleaner. And remember Baraxo powdered hand soap in the attractive new plastic container. Both at your grocer's now.
Rewriting and updating the Blue Blood rankings for 2018. Part 1, Smacking Off the Podcast, welcomes Timothy Bailey and Kyle Gold.
So I'll just kick it off. I mentioned the other night, I'll mention it again. In my opinion, I feel that there's 12 programs that are Blue Bloods. You know, you have your traditional Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, USC, Michigan, Nebraska, Texas, making sure I'm not missing any here tonight here. But I also consider, Miami, Florida State, Penn State in that conversation as well. Miami's probably my weakest link. I'm more sold with Florida State as one.
I think they're a better program.
I think here's the way I look at Florida State, and this is stuff that I didn't bring up the other night here. Before 2016 started, the AP poll did for their AP era the top 100 programs. Ohio State was number one for that poll, but Florida State was ninth. Other programs that we put in there are considering for the Blue Bloods. Penn State was 12th, Miami was 13th, and Tennessee, who was chosen as a Blue Blood, was 14th. I mean, that's pretty good. Pretty good. Right. Here's another thing to consider with Florida State here. They have as many New Year's Six bowl appearances as Michigan does. Michigan, is counting every win since they beat the nursing schools in the schools of the deaf back in the early 1900s. So I do feel, like if they're not Blue Blood status, it's because you mentioned the other night, Timothy. Do you want me to say Tim or Timothy? I can go either way. I'm used to.
Yeah, Timothy's fine. I mean, I'm not.
Here's the thing. Yeah, they didn't start getting serious about football until 1947, and they had to go through some pretty shitholes. They had the great Bill Peterson era, which didn't go very much, but when Bobby Bowden took over in '76. By 79, they were already playing in the Orange Bowl, and pretty much the last 40 years, you can literally count on it in every decade there that they've played a major, major bowl games, every year, whether they were playing Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl in the 80s or, Nebraska or.
Well, since 1980, Florida State has won more games than every other program.
Yeah, I mean, to me.
So yeah, absolutely.
I know, and to me, I think Miami has the 5 titles, and that's the bling. And I know we all put them there, but let's consider this: Miami has so many gaps in their history. It's
absolutely.
It's not even funny. I mean, in the 70s, they were so awful. If you remember, in the U documentary, the 30 for 30. They were saying you could go to games for free if you bought the value meal from Burger King. I mean, that's how terrible they are. And then they had their great peaks from '83 to '92, I mean, they were good in 93 and 94, but then they got hit with the Pell Grant scandal that crippled their program for about 5 years. And they were like awesome 2000, 2001, 2002, even into 2003, they had a hell of a team.
Their eras of greatness were just so extreme is the only reason why they're even in the conversation. Because they've been awful. They've been awful. I don't know how many years they've technically been a program, but let's say like 90 just to be safe. They have like 15 years of really, really strong years, and then everything else is more than below average.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at Miami and I just say, okay, if we're saying they're a blue blood for these, you know, and I mean, we all agreed it's the championship extreme that they have. I look at Florida State, you know, grant you, they have only 3 titles. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's impressive considering the program didn't join the 90s.
Right. That's absolutely impressive.
I mean, they're running in top 4 goes without question. Bobby Bowden, if he isn't in your top 3 or 4 coaches of all time, I question the validity of your list.
He's not in mine.
Again,
I think he was a great coach.
I don't think he's in the top 3 or 4 either, but that's not a knock on him. It's just that the people that came before him were so great. Because you have Saban, Bryant, you have like Wilkinson, and I'm just paraphrasing a few that are just greater than him that you could name off the top. You could argue Paterno, but anyway, I get your point though. He's a great coach. He's clearly top 10. Clearly,
yes, absolutely.
And I mean, the fact they've won a national title post Bowden. I mean, think about that. Think of how many programs replace a legend like Bobby Bowden, and how many times do those coaches win national titles? I mean, Nebraska,
blue bloods.
Yeah,
Florida State would be the exception if they're not a blue blood.
Yeah,
I will say this though: Bowden did go down and stay down long enough that when Jimbo got the job, there was really nowhere to go but up at that point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. In the modern era as well, there is advantages to having Florida. Florida State also doesn't have the greatest resources money-wise. They're outside of the top 20 in annual revenue. So for them to be as good as they have been has been impressive. But I will say that being in Florida does give you advantages, especially in this era, that other programs just simply won't have because they're not in the state of Florida.
I mean,
I mean, like, once again, that's not a knock. I'm just saying that when Jimbo took over, if Bowden had stayed longer, it might have gotten bad there because it was really going downhill for him. But when Jimbo took over, he was able to, do the new era stuff, and he knew what he was doing, and he really let it change because, Bowden didn't leave FSU in the best spot when he left. But it was much better than it was before he took it. We put it that way. Yeah. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
All right. And what was some of the other programs that got brought up? Pitt was also brought up.
Well, Pitt's not a blue blood. I mean, if we were talking blue bloods of the first half century of college football, Pitt's a blue blood.
Oh, absolutely. Pitt, Michigan were the programs in the early portion of college football.
I mean, Pitt won 8 national titles before 1936.
Although Pitt did win a national championship in a year when they were 4-1, and there was a 9-0 Texas team that didn't even get a vote.
I'm going to give it to the Texas team. I hate Pitt, but here's the thing: as I mentioned the other night, do a Pitt all-time team and put them against any team in college football. The Pitt team could probably run the table. I mean, you start doing their lineup. I mean, Marino, Dorsett, Curtis Martin, LaShawn McCoy, Larry Fitzgerald, Mike Ditka, Hugh Green, Ricky Jen, Aaron Donald.
I didn't even realize Aaron Donald went to Pitt. Didn't Darrell Revis go to Pitt?
Who was that, Timothy?
Darrell Revis. Darrell Revis?
Darrell Revis is from Aliquippa, went to Pitt. Yeah. I mean,
Pitt's lineup is dangerous. I mean, they have arguably the greatest quarterback of all time and one of the top 10 running backs of all time in the NFL.
Yeah, and here's the crazy thing with Pitt's squad is, I was proving a point to someone the other day about it, and each of these guys that I'm telling you that's on the Pitt team, was an All-Pro or a multi-time Pro Bowler in the NFL. Like they're their D-line backups are like Tony Saragusa and like Bill Moss, and like these guys were 3- and 4-time All-Pros. I mean,
yeah. When I look at all-time teams, as funny as it is, I think if you look at most lists when they say who their top blue bloods, plays Alabama and Oklahoma, they're flipped 1 and 2 on almost every major list. Almost all of them say Oklahoma, Alabama. Oklahoma and Alabama may have the greatest college programs, but their all-time teams, though they're very good, do not compare to Pitt, Miami, or Notre Dame. They just don't.
No.
For always knowing that we love Jell-O pudding, here's to Mom. And for always letting us lick the spoon after she mixes it, here's to Mom. And for not getting mad at us because we wore Dad's bowling shoes into the bathtub, here's to Mom.
Kids love Jell-O brand pudding, and since it's probably on your shelf, why not make some tonight?
Here's to you, Mom.
Visit our Facebook pages, Smacking Off the Podcast fan page and Smacking Off the Podcast group page, facebook.com/group/smackoff, facebook.com/smackologists.
It's because of the depth of those three schools.
They're, like Southern Cal would be another one. I mean, outside
Southern Cal's is I forgot to mention them. Southern Cal's is absolutely absurd.
I mean,
the only there's certain spots Alabama and Oklahoma compete. Oklahoma would definitely compete at quarterback and running back and offensive line and defensive line. Alabama linebackers, defensive line, quarterbacks. But when you look at the four we named originally, those guys, all-time great teams, they just have greatness across the board at every position.
Oh yeah, when you look at USC's team, like look at safety: Ronnie Lott, Troy Polamalu, Joey Browner, Tim McDonald, Willie Wood.
Who would you have at running back? Who do you want? I mean,
Simpson, Marcus Allen. Like it's crazy. Even
which quarterback do you take? You taking Leinart, Palmer? Who you want?
I'll take Carson Palmer. Wide receiver Lynn Swann.
Yes.
Keyshawn Johnson, and it's just
even their recent ones like Robert Woods and Marquise Lee were very, very good.
Yeah, in linebacker, holy shit. Clay Matthews, Junior Seau, Willie McGinnis.
Clay Matthews was a third stringer on that 2004 team that won the national championship.
Yeah. I mean, it's
absolutely
scary what they bring to the table.
Just because across the board, they seem to have no gaps across the board.
They don't. Like unequivocally, they have the national titles, they have the conference titles, they own the Rose Bowl. All with the all-time team, that is a quintessential blue blood.
Yeah.
If there ever was one. I also wanted to bring up Penn State again because I wanted to at least give them at least a little bit more juice than I did the other night because I was so into Florida State. But so there's this website called collegefootballresults.com, and they tabulate all the win-loss records of programs since 1945. Penn State got 598 wins since 1945. Here are the programs who have more wins than Penn State: Ohio State, Oklahoma, and
Nebraska.
Nebraska's 588. And the last one is Alabama. That's it. You got 3 programs who have more wins than Penn State since 1945.
Right. Absolutely. When you look at their total wins, they more than qualify when it comes to their total wins. But for whatever reason, I don't know. As I look back at history a little bit, and excuse my ignorance because I am young, it seems almost as if Penn State was treated as the Boise State of their era. When they were.
The thing is, Eastern Independents were what Boise State went through in the 2000s, and Penn State went undefeated in 68-69, and they also went undefeated again in '73. By no means am I going to say they should UCF the national title for those years. They haven't. Penn State played like every time they always had a follow-up bowl game.
Right.
They played someone legit. One of the biggest wins the program ever had was the '70 Cotton Bowl. It was either '70 or '71 Cotton Bowl against Texas, and Penn State just beat the tar out of Darrell Royal's Longhorns 30-6. Penn State played, like I said, the lack of national titles. They have 2. They played for 2 more in that time. They lost both of them once to Alabama.
I definitely think that Penn State, and I felt this way after we had done we'd been done with our conversation. I didn't feel like we gave Penn State a fair shake. The thing about Penn State is that they were just so ridiculously consistent, and it's really hard to overlook how consistent they were, and they were great. It wasn't like they were consistent. They were 9-3 every year. I mean, they had undefeated seasons, and I have this is my philosophy, and on previous years, if you have an undefeated season before the BCS era, I believe that your school should be claiming that as a national championship as long as you at least got 5 wins in an undefeated season. I'm not sure what your guys' opinions are on that. I know that you could joke about UCF when I say that, but Doug, what's your opinions on that? Because I think when you look back at the poll era, it was so ridiculously biased, especially towards East Coast teams. Like I could use 73 and 78 for an example. Alabama always got the benefit of the doubt that other teams didn't.
73, 78. 73 is when they played Notre Dame. They took the UPI trophy at the end of the regular season, played Notre Dame for the AP and AP. Okay, and then the 78 season they played Penn State, which was number 1, and Alabama was number 2. They did have a loss to USC that year.
Right, and they split with USC for the national championship. And
USC had a later loss. They had a loss.
They lost to Oregon State like 3-0 or something weird.
Right.
But you get the point. In the poll era, but this is what I'm saying is, in the poll era, the East Coast teams got the benefit of the doubt. I would say that, and I'm not saying Alabama doesn't deserve to claim them, but I'm just saying if you're undefeated, I think you should be able to claim the national championship, and no one should really bat an eye. Just because there was no real way to determine the champion back then.
Yeah,
it's very few times we were fortunate enough to have the 1 and 2 matchup, and even sometimes when we had the 1 and 2 matchup, there would be a team that deserved a shot as well. Outside of it,
there was a lot of politics back in the day. One of the reasons I don't fault Alabama is because the reason Penn State got where they were at in the 80s with their national titles was because Alabama and Bear Bryant took a liking to Joe Paterno and said, "We love your program. We want to play you." Like, Bryant picked Penn State to play in a '75 Sugar Bowl when he could have played Nebraska or Oklahoma.
Yep.
And let's put it to you like this, Doug. Name me another time in the history of the University Alabama has had a relationship with a program like Penn State, a relationship of playing, home and home sites. That just doesn't happen with Alabama.
No. No, you're right. They had a brief relationship with Notre Dame in the 80s. I think they're going to play Notre Dame in 2028 and 2029.
Yeah.
That'll be they did play. No, they actually played a home and home with Notre Dame that went back into 1980, I think. They played Notre Dame in 80, 81, 86, and 87.
Yeah, but
and then they played recently too. Alabama and Penn State did play somewhat recently.
They did actually. Alabama played them in the 2011 season.
10 and 11.
Yep.
We actually, Mal Moore called us, and we were supposed to play 06-07. Mal Moore called us and said, "Hey, can you push it back because I guess some shit was going down." We acquiesced those games. That's just the respect both programs have for one another. Like I said, I was just when I was doing a little more research, Penn State first appeared in the AP poll in 1940. Since 1940, they have appeared in the poll every year except for 4 times. That's impressive. You're talking right there, a 78-year run there, and you've been in the poll in the top in there. Now remember, the AP top 25 wasn't 25 all those years. So for 73 or 74 of those years, Penn State was ranked in the AP, which is impressive in my opinion.
The Ford Motor Company sneaky squeak test. What they do is they sneak a car, any car, off the Ford Mercury or Lincoln production line and drive it to the sneaky squeak testing machine. It's like bumping along over potholes and rugged roads. Then they listen for squeaks, sometimes with a stethoscope. Now, if it don't pass the test, back it goes. Ford Motor Company tries hard to keep squeaks from sneaking by. It's simple. Ford wants to be your car.
Smacking Off the Podcast welcomes Sean Rickhoven and Sean Devine.
Your team's ass, just for the record. Owns your ass. Owns your ass. Owns your ass.
Anyway, so it allows you to have your five blue bloods that we all know: USC, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Texas, and then it allows you to have, Bama in there. And really, that's everyone can attest that those are your 5. Those are your 6 when you include Notre Dame. Once you get past that, you start arguing and bitching about what is and isn't a blue blood. We went back and forth about Nebraska and then Miami, and I'm still of the mindset that Pitt deserves to be in over Michigan, but that's just my opinion.
Right.
I would put Pitt in with Michigan. I would concede that.
Well, we threw it up to 10 just to make it interesting, and it was interesting, and we'll always have our memories of that great conversation. but anyway, and we did come up with 10 teams, and we ordered them, and we just got to tally up the numbers. But
I like that 10. To be honest, I'm comfortable with that 10. And who's to say, Lord willing, if we're still here in 50 or 75 years, that there aren't more in that group.
It's true.
We could go to 12, maybe even 14. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Well, so Sean, now that it's just there's less people, let me ask you, how long does someone have to have success, and what level of success do they have to enter that blue blood status?
Well, I think that's 2 separate points you're putting together. And hear me out when I say that. If you have, we'll say, fairly good success, we'll say, I'll use a school letter rank, say you have B or B plus success for 50 or 60 years versus A plus for 2 decades. I mean, for example, just as an example here, to me, Michigan State's, I have great respect for the Spartan program. If they keep doing what they're doing, that they've been doing for the last, say, 10 years, for the next 20, they could be in there. Now, what if Clemson keeps doing what they're doing for another 15 or 20? Would they both not deserve consideration? Because, to me, Michigan State has a much longer, greater history than Clemson, but they have not had the pinnacle or peaks that Clemson has had over the last 5 or 6 years. Correct?
True, but you're absolutely right. However, last night we talked and discounted Florida State because all of their success was recent. And by recent we mean like 20, 25 years. So, I mean, and that begs the question is, how long does someone have to have sustained success, and at what level? Because I think we keep falling into the trap of you had to have been good when we were growing up to be considered a blue blood. I mean, because if you look at it, you would have a very hard time convincing anyone that Nebraska has had the same success as Florida State for anyone under the age of 25. You would have a hard time arguing that, because when we were growing up, we saw the 70s, 80s, 90s Nebraska teams who were literally dominating people into the ground. And then you had Florida State, who was coming up, and then they still had all that sustained success afterward. I mean, granted, I liked Bo Pelini. I thought he was a good coach, but it was Bo Pelini 3 L's. It was guaranteed every year he was taking 3 L's, but at 9 wins a season, that's a sustained success.
Yeah.
My only point from last night is Florida State has not done enough, but I'm pretty confident in the next 10 to 20 years that they'll definitely be there in the conversation.
I mean, they won 3 national championships.
2.
Okay, 2. I'll even concede 2.
93 is still quite a thorn in my side, so that's my bias, and I'll freely admit that. I'll admit that. But I agree with you. I mean, I was just merely from my point last night was simply up to right now, this day, May 2nd, 2018. I'm not quite ready to put them into the club. I'm sure if Taggart or whoever follows him continues the success they've had, it should be easy. Florida State, I mean, where they're at, the conference they play in.
Prime recruiting. It's like this is what baffles me is like how did Texas have such a sharp drop off so quickly without a change in coaching staff? Because I mean I just don't get it.
Well, Mac Brown's last 3 years there, he didn't do shit.
Yeah.
He didn't recruit. He was eating fat, living high on the hog, and living off of 2005 for as long as he could before finally, the Texas alumnus and base realized, wait a minute, we haven't done shit since really the beat down to Bama in the Rose Bowl. It's been 4 years. All right, we gotta wake up here and start doing stuff. And really, the wake up call was A&M moving to the SEC.
Yeah, and what was it like? The last 4 Heisman winners came from Texas and didn't have a Texas offer. Like, I think that really highlighted it when he got fired. I mean, because it was what Jameis Winston, Johnny Manziel, and then I think there was who was it?
Jameis was from Alabama, but yeah, Johnny Manziel, Robert Griffin, and
yeah, that's who it was. And then,
missing somebody else here.
Yeah, well, I know J.T. Barrett was from Texas, didn't have a Texas offer, and he was always finishing high in that Heisman voting, and it was one of those.
But we all know that Texas can just, because it's Texas, can turn it around like that because it's Texas. The money, the recruiting base.
They're still the most profitable team in college football.
Yeah, I mean they got their own. They're the only one that has their own network. Their own network.
It is the Longhorn Network. It's not the SEC Network, the Big Ten Network. I mean, the next closest thing would be Notre Dame with CBS in their back pocket. But I mean, even then, you're
NBC,
NBC.
But NBC will kick, when we play lesser teams, will kick us over to NBC Sports Network and won't put us on main NBC. For example, I think we play Ball State this fall, and that's going to be an NBC Sports Network game, not an actual NBC game. And I think 2 years ago we played Air Force, and they pushed that over to NBC. But yeah, Longhorn Network is Longhorn Network. I mean, it's 24/7 Texas, nothing else. Occasionally some snippets of other Big 12 schools, but really it's Texas. So I'm not worried about Texas recovering, even though I know they're a little light on the national championship number. The school that I think is of the original 8 that is in danger is truly Nebraska. I really feel and I know Timothy put out last night, well, they've had 8-win, 9-win, and 10-win seasons, but I think Timothy puts up too much of an emphasis on wins, and maybe that's my Notre Dame bias coming out. I don't really give you credit for beating New Mexico State at home in September. That doesn't really – the games that matter are the games that matter. We know what games those are. And Nebraska truly hasn't beaten anybody in the Big Ten or even outside of the Big Ten in a relevant something's at stake here in the last 10 years.
I think, and this isn't me trying to toot my own horn by saying my program's great. I legitimately think their best win in the Big Ten was the 2015 win over Michigan State on that last play where they beat us. I mean, I legitimately think that is their best Big Ten win.
How long has it been since your mom's fixed Jell-O pudding for you?
A long time ago.
How long? A long, long time. But she knows it's good for you, right? And she knows that you love it, right? Well, maybe she forgot. Maybe I should remind her. Moms, you know how the kids love Jell-O pudding, and you know it's made with fresh milk, so it's wholesome. And you haven't made Jell-O pudding for them since
Last night.
last what? Kids love Jell-O brand pudding. Remember.
I mean, I don't consider myself a troll. Really, I consider myself a
I don't know about, bro. Not me, bro. I don't know about Justin.
Speak goddamn women and so man, I'll beat your goddamn brains.
Yeah, but it was still a horrible look for Oklahoma.
Dude, whatever you're smoking, buy a ton of it.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
I would agree. As far as in the Big Ten, absolutely.
Hey guys,
that's it.
Hey guys, let me throw something out there real quick. As y'all were saying that other teams in the next 15 to 20 years could add to this list, how about the teams that may actually remove themselves from this list over that period?
So, I mean, there's Nebraska.
There is Nebraska.
There's also, and this isn't because I hate them. I mean, it's a very legitimate concern, is Michigan.
Right.
Because if you look at it, everyone wants to talk about, well, Harbaugh's seat's getting hot, Harbaugh's seat's getting hot. Legitimately, I want you to look around the college landscape and say, okay, if they fire Jim Harbaugh, who the fuck are they going to hire? The answer is
I agree. I agree.
No.
This is Michigan right now is in a make or break situation with Jim Harbaugh. If Jim Harbaugh does not turn it around there, this is basically the same question you're asking. Who can turn it around there then? Who can? I mean, other than maybe Nick Saban or Urban Meyer, and that's not going. Neither of those are ever going to happen. Who could actually turn it around in Ann Arbor if Jim Harbaugh can? And right now it's not looking good. They're 1-6 against their two main rivals, Ohio State and Michigan State. That's not why they brought Jim Harbaugh in. He's Mr. Super Bowl, NFC Championship games, and he's 1-6. 1-6, and one very embarrassing loss in the block punt return in their own building against Sparty, which I love, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Nebraska's kind of in the same predicament with Scott Frost. I mean, if Scott Frost can't turn it around at Nebraska, I think Nebraska's looking at a situation. I know they're making good money where they're at, but have they lost their identity by moving to the big conference?
So here's the thing with the loss of identity. I don't think they lost their identity. What they lost is that recruiting foothold into Texas,
right?
Because they played Texas every year. So
and one other area, Los Angeles. Osborne was able to recruit East LA big, and that was in the 90s when they had their heyday. Who was down in LA in the 90s? USC. USC wasn't shit in the 90s in LA. So Osborne was able to go in there and grab running backs, defensive backs. They can't do that anymore.
No. I mean, because, don't get me wrong, Nebraska still has a storied program. Their fans are still rabid, but kids aren't flocking to Nebraska. They're not flocking to Michigan because they're Nebraska or they're Michigan. They're flocking to Alabama. They're flocking to Ohio State. Why? Because they see these teams winning the championships. They see these teams out there putting up records. And that's what kids want to be a part of. I mean, the Michigan State fan base jokes about it, but it's like the kids graduating high school right now know nothing but Michigan failure. Because they're graduating high school and Michigan State has won like 9 of the last 11 against them.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Because you figure 18-year-olds were born in 2000. Think about it. I know we're old, but 2000 is when these kids that are right now thinking about 2000 and 2001, so they barely know 9/11, are thinking about committing to a school. Michigan hasn't really been. I mean, what's their latest best? Maybe that bowl win over Tebow to send Lloyd Carr off is like their best bowl win of the last kind of 18, 17 years.
Yeah, it'd probably be that. To be perfectly honest,
that was a down year for Florida too.
But you got to remember too, that was the year that they lost to Appalachian State at home.
Right. I mean, that's embarrassing.
I mean,
and they were 7, 8 years old when that happened. I mean, that's
I mean, we're at the point where like if they don't win one in the next 2 or 3 years, none of these players are going to remember them winning a Big Ten title.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing for Michigan is if Harbaugh doesn't beat, and not to slight Michigan State, Sean, but if Harbaugh doesn't beat Ohio State this year or next year, that's huge. Yep. That is a big time failure.
Well, and so it's really funny that you say that, because I have quite a few Michigan friends, and they ask them, after the seasons and after all the hard feelings are over, who would you rather beat, Michigan State or Ohio State? And hands down, 99% of the answers is always Michigan State. And the answer is because we're supposed to beat them. They can absorb the fact that, hey, we are losing to Ohio State. Why? Because Ohio State is the number one recruiting class. Yes, they're our main rival.
That's a bad mentality.
Exactly.
Imagine if this fall Michigan loses to Notre Dame to start the season, Michigan State in the middle of the season, and then finishes off their regular season by losing to Ohio State. That sets them back, a boatload. I mean, huge.
Yeah. And I mean, they legitimately could win the rest of their games. They could go 9-3 and lose those 3 games, and I can guarantee every Michigan fan will say this is a failure of the season.
They've taken a step back.
Let's go back to Nebraska for a second. We were talking about their identity. Now, you think about this. They had the Big Texas game every year, if I'm not mistaken, and of course they had the Oklahoma game. What if they replaced those rivalries with in the Big? There's really nothing.
A forced rivalry with Iowa,
and Wisconsin.
With Wisconsin.
Yeah, but those games are just not on they're not nationally on the level that Nebraska.
No, and they never will.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But, I mean, to be fair, I mean, is Oklahoma State really on the level of Oklahoma, Nebraska?
No.
I mean,
no, but Oklahoma seems to have weathered this a lot better than Nebraska has.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's because Oklahoma, and not to bash the Big 12 too much, the Big 12 is pretty much a one-trick pony. I mean, you had TCU and Baylor there for like a hot minute, but I mean, it is pretty much that is the Oklahoma Texas show, and it is wins the Red River Battle.
It always has been. I mean, it's always, well before. Okay, so if we time travel here for a hot minute, Oklahoma and Nebraska were part of the Big Six, which then became the Big Eight. Texas was always part of the Southwest Conference, but what Oklahoma had going for it was it always played Texas out of conference in that Red River rivalry game, regardless of if they were in conference or not. They were not. Now they happen to be in conference together. But Oklahoma and Texas, let's be honest, as much as those two fan bases hate each other, they're tied at the hip. They're married to each other. For better or for worse, as far as football is concerned.
Yeah, their entire identity is wrapped up in one another.
Yeah, I mean, and the players that don't go to Texas, like Brian Bosworth's a great example, went to Oklahoma, and what did he want to do? He didn't want to win the Big Eight. He wanted to beat Texas. That's all he cared about, was beating Texas. Yeah. And then in conference-wise, the Big Eight, which then became the Big 12, the other game was Nebraska-Oklahoma. Those 3 teams basically made the kind of Great Plains, who was coming out of the Great Plains essentially as the best team.
Yeah.
I mean, now Nebraska joining the Big Ten, yeah, the money's great. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Big Ten Network and the also the academic accreditation that Nebraska has gained from joining the Big Ten is certainly great, but it has hurt them football-wise because now they're Wisconsin, they're Minnesota, they're Iowa, and that's how kind of people are sort of looking at them, especially young people, because they don't know the 90s. Right. There's a lot of people I know that they go, who the hell's Tommy Frazier? Who the hell's Lawrence Phillips? Who's Trev Alberts? You and I and Doug know these names easily, but young people are like, who the fuck are you talking about?
Absolutely.
So let me ask this, Sean. Because Notre Dame isn't in a conference, what kind of success do they have to maintain to remain that blue blood, in your opinion? Because we measure all these other teams by conference championships. Like, at a minimum, you need to win your conference, roughly once every 5 years to kind of maintain that status. But with Notre Dame not having a conference, I mean, it's really easy for them to get to 9 wins a season based upon their schedule.
Please subscribe to our channel by clicking the small smacking off icon at the top of the screen now. Click the link at the bottom of the screen to watch last week's episode.